In Longview, they're all pretty much yellow, but some will turn red, white, and blue. As part of the America 250 celebration, the City of Longview is asking artists to help them paint some patriotism around town. KLTV7's Jamie Boyum has more tonight on their unique canvas.
They are made to be functional, not exactly works of art, but some downtown Longview fire hydrants have been relabeled as canvases. Arts Longview Executive Director Christina Cavazos and Longview Director of Community Destinations Sean Hara admire the first hydrant gone patriotic.
The last several years, we've really seen a resurgence within our downtown area of both businesses and community investment, as well as things like murals and art. A lot of different things popping up all around downtown, and so this certainly fits within that area.
We're always looking for new ways to add and enhance our cultural arts district, and so when we heard about this project that one of our council members had suggested, it was just a really perfect fit with what we've already been trying to do downtown.
Zach Israel owns Ollie's Skate Shop in downtown Longview and couldn't resist choosing a city-suggested design and painting the second hydrant.
The city is supplying the paint, similar to murals, which need a certain type of paint. These fire hydrants need a certain type of paint.
And that industrial enamel paint was used by a member of the Longview Fire Department who painted the first one.
The fire department's been really supportive of this project, and we're excited to have them on board and painting.
I think it's a good way to just add some more art to downtown. Good cause for America's 250, so why not paint a Captain America fire hydrant?
So there's about 40 hydrants getting the variation of the flag treatment, but I'm thinking maybe there should be 50. Jamie Boyum, KLTV 7 News.
If you want to volunteer to paint a few fire hydrants during downtown Longview's Art Walk on the 2nd of April, just scan that QR code on screen or click on the big red box at kltv.com.